Welcome to our little chat today. Today's chat is going to be around grief and loss. Very lighthearted topic, as you can imagine. But the reason why I wanted to bring it up, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons I wanted to bring up grief and loss is we are in a really heavy time of the year as it is. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but we're in a really heavy time of year where most of us are still dealing with the heaviness of winter and the layers and energetic layers upon layers of heaviness start to take its toll. At first, it feels so cozy. We feel cozy. We feel like we're warm. We're, you know, in a good place. And then at some point, that hibernation sort of feeling, even though most of us don't hibernate, becomes heavy. And for some of us, we're going to be more susceptible to that heaviness. And so, for example, right now, I'm seeing a lot of my clients, as well as a lot of family, friends, things being tossed around on the internet. They're talking about this intense heaviness that they have, and there's a lot of grief. Some of the grief is fresh, some of it's new, and some of the grief is really old. Some of the grief has lingered, and some of this grief sometimes masquerades as other things. So I want you to think about grief and loss in a slightly more complex way. Most of us can agree that when we lose someone or something, there's grief, right? So if you are watching, you can say hashtag replay or live, and you can say, yes, I've lost someone. So losing someone, losing a pet, these types of losses we all can really relate to. And there's also the loss, and grief of an expected passing. Maybe somebody is on their way out and dealing with the impending change and knowing that things are going to shift can be really intense, right? But I want you to also think about things that aren't so cut and dry. I want you to think about we all know 2020, we've expected and experienced a lot of loss given that, right? But I want you to think about the loss that you might be dealing with. Maybe it's in friendships, maybe it's something with your career, maybe it's just a loss of something that never came to fruition. Maybe it was something with opportunity. One person had mentioned that there's they were divorced from their partner and they hadn't been in their lives in many years, but there's still this sort of grief, this pervading grief, which, so many of us just say, oh, just get over it. You can hear people say that. Okay, well, now you've had your time to grieve, get over it. So what I want you to understand is that grief isn't something that you can necessarily just get over. Some people get really stuck in grief. And some of it feels very identifiable, right? Your heart is broken. There are tears all the time. There are different things in different ways. And we can kind of identify yeah, that's your grief. You may even be able to say, this is my grief. But grief can be tricky because if you are not feeling like you are moving through it, it can get stuck in the body because you're not able to express it. You're not able to be with it. Whether it's because other people, maybe you felt like you weren't allowed to share your grief because you shouldn't be grieving. Okay. You might have this feeling like, I shouldn't be grieving. It's ridiculous for me to think I need to be grieving over this, but yet it's stuck. So, what I want you to think about with the realm of grief and loss is, where are you experiencing certain symptoms and when did they start? This is a common question I ask all of my clients when we're working on their health is, when did this start? And a lot of times it'll be like, when so-and-so died, or, actually it happened when this happened and, my dog died. And so we're able to see that there was an event. Now, not all symptoms happen because of an event, but they certainly can. These events can be something that you feel like you're trying to prepare for, and the events can also feel very sudden. And what happens is within you, you respond the way that feels most safe. You may shut down, you may numb, you may get really lost and busy in your work. There are a lot of different ways in which you are going to cope. But if you're coping and using your methods for coping since you were a child, you're not allowing yourself to process the grief, to learn from the grief, to take this grief, this loss, this feeling, whatever the words are. Maybe there's anguish, heartbreak. There's so many different ways to describe grief. And if you are feeling like you don't know how to work with it, it just feels all encompassing and overwhelming, then what happens is at some point, life starts to shift and your whole life ends up being about your grief and loss, and you don't know how to move forward because you haven't been able to properly interact and engage with it, to feel it. Some of it's just too hard to feel, right? When you lose somebody so important to you, when you lose a pet, when something tragic happens, especially if it was unexpected. Think about it this way. You may not have been able to digest this. And in the fact that you weren't able to digest this experience, which is okay, it's normal, your body has to figure out a way to deal with that stuck energy. Maybe it's going to come up in migraines. I've seen a lot of people who it comes up with like either joint pain or neuralgia or like electric pains in their body. Maybe it's in all of a sudden they're dealing with really heavy periods, or their menopause, which was seeming to go along without a hitch, suddenly becomes, I'm just stuck in hot flash after hot flash. My mood is, it's like I'm in a dark cloud, and what we think is, oh, I need to change something with my diet, or, oh, I need to do this. But it might be this idea of there's some stuck grief. And then other things that are happening in life just also feel a little too hard to move through. And so, in a way, instead of going about in a sort of a flow, it's like you're in the muck. So, this is why this time of year, especially, this heightens it, because we're in spring. Spring energy is where we've got the snow melting, or the melting energy with the earth energy. And it creates this mud. And now mud is what wonderful things will grow from. But being in the mud can be really hard. Just simply being in the mud can be really hard. So I want you to think about, are there certain symptoms that have gotten worse, came out of nowhere, aren't responding to your usual methods since the grief or loss? And then I want you to ask yourself, and just being really just interested in how you are responding to the grief, the loss, the mourning, the anguish, the heartbreak. What is it that I want to learn from this? Like, why is it still with me? Because at some point, for many people, not everyone, but for many people, after a certain loss has taken place and there's been some time and you've taken some time to feel into your feelings, to express yourself, to be with the heaviness, it seems as though that's become digested, and there's reflection, there's perspective shift. If it's a loss of a loved one, there's the ability to be in the memory and to feel into the memory and to really find the beauty in it. And even if there's sadness, like, oh, I wish so-and-so was here to see this, it doesn't keep you from being able to move in a flow, right? I don't want anyone to think that when I'm saying this, that your sadness, the grief, the heartbreak should be swept aside. It doesn't really work that way. It never, I would say, certain kinds of griefs never go away. Just the way that you interact with them does. It doesn't become so all encompassing. It doesn't become just so, heart wrenching, right? Like, oh, thinking of that person or thinking of the situation or thinking of it, almost you're reliving it again, right? This isn't what we want. We want to be able to kind of look upon it with a lot of grace for ourselves, for the situation, for the person, for whatever, and absorb that, digest that, and be able to be with it. So if any of you have any thoughts on this, any questions, any like, no way, here's my take on it, I want to hear it, because I don't think that any of us, when it comes to grief, we can't grieve incorrectly. I don't think you can grieve incorrectly. I think that your body, your soul, your system, it wants to do what it thinks is best to keep you feeling as safe as possible, right? So if we're trying to be safe, we don't want to, let's say we stop interacting with other people because having our emotions makes them uncomfortable. Like, let's say we've been out with friends or whatever, and they want us to be done and they don't want to see it. To keep us safe, we isolate. We don't talk about it, right? Because I don't want to hear them telling me I should be over my grief. I should just get over it, right? And so then what happens is we isolate, we feel more alone. We start to shut down maybe more, right? But this is what your system is doing, because it's like, oh, you want to stay safe. The thing about safety sometimes, and this goes for everything, whether it has to do with grief or loss, is that safety can also be really uncomfortable. And this is why we have a hard time with change in general. What we're used to, even if we don't like it, even if it's very uncomfortable, we know what to expect. We know how it will sort of be. So we can kind of batten down the hatches and keep sailing through this discomfort that we're used to. But when you're looking to change, when you're looking to heal, when you're looking to grow, you are going into a different discomfort that feels way more uncertain, right? But we all know that in order to heal and in order to change, we're going to need to shift some things. And there will be a learning curve. And there will be, discomfort in the uncertainty. But you can live in the uncertainty of what's, you're used to. Or you can try a different way of uncertainty and just reminding yourself really gently, maybe even just, it's okay. You're doing something different. It's uncomfortable doing this differently, right? Like learning to live without somebody. Let's say they were your partner. Let's say they were a lover, a partner, a family member, your parent, someone you deeply, deeply, deeply cared about. And you have to learn how to live without them in the way you were used to. And so now you're being stretched and asked, after a time, you may need to be stretched and asked, how do I learn how to live with them, without them, and still carry them with me in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm breaking each and every single day, right? And so when we look at the combination of how you're handling grief, there's no good or bad way, but you want to see, how is it impacting my whole life? And how do I allow myself to get back into a place of flow? Not to come across as some cruel robot who doesn't give a shit, because I think that's what a lot of us worry about, is if we get over something and we seem fine, then people are going to think, well, what's wrong with you? Are you cold-hearted? No, but I have to live my life, right? So there is, again, this is a complex situation, regardless of the type of loss, the type of grief, the event, the situation, whatever it is, it's complex. And you have to come to a place within yourself that allows you to feel as good as you can about how you're approaching it. And if this resonates with you, there are a lot of homeopathic remedies and a lot of different methods in which to integrate the grief so that you can digest it, so that you can move forward through life without it taking over, without it feeling like you are going to crumble from day to day, just like superhuman effort to get through. And of course, some of these things can take time because you are relearning something that likely you never were taught. And so you had to kind of bit and piece it together to try to make it through. So let me know if you have experienced grief or loss. And again, think of it in a more not typical way, right? We've got the typical stuff that's in that is something that I think we all can again relate to, right? Death of parent, family member, friend, of pets, other loved ones. And then there's this grief or loss for what could be for the loss of maybe a promotion, divorce, right? Of suddenly becoming a parent and being like, who am I? Who am I? I'm supposed to be this person's mom. There's grief and loss on so many levels. So I don't want you to discount your experiences and feel like they need to be swept under the rug. What we want to do again is we want to digest them, integrate them, take the beautiful pieces of them, take the pain, and be able to handle it in such a way where it doesn't become all consuming and where you aren't left feeling like you're alone and that you don't have anywhere to go. Because that's just too difficult of a place to be. So if you want to talk any more about grief, or if you have any questions, again, hashtag replay, put the questions in. If you want to share this video with someone else, I will be posting it to my YouTube channel. So I can get you that link. And then you can share it with anyone who you think might be beneficial for. But if you want to explore how to digest your grief and how to bring balance to some of the symptoms you might be experiencing, especially if they've been very heightened and feel like, the usual methods haven't been working. I used to have migraines and headaches, but now nothing touches it. Or, I used to have a little bit of joint pain, but now nothing's touching it. Please send me a DM, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And if you are interested in taking this conversation a little bit further, I'm happy to come in and do another chat on grief and your specific questions. So thank you so much for stopping, and please share this video. All right.